This week we're learning Parsha Vayigash. Very dramatic Parsha. It continues the story of Joseph basically and his brothers. Judah approaches Joseph to plead for release of Benjamin, offering basically himself as a slave instead to this Egyptian ruler. But Joseph, when he finally can see, he witnesses his brothers' loyalty to one another, he cannot hold the secret any longer of his identity. And he tells them, Ani Joseph, I am Joseph, he declares. And the next question is, my father still alive? Immediately, you can imagine the confusion brothers experienced. They could never imagine Joseph being this horrible Egyptian, very stern ruler who accuses them of spying and all sorts of other problems. They overcome by shame and remorse. Probably in addition, they are scared of Joseph's possible retribution as well. But Joseph immediately comforts them, and he says them, it was not you who sent me here. He says to them, but God. It has all been ordained from above. It means God had a plan to save us and the entire region from the famine. The brothers rush back to Canaan with the great news to Jacob, and eventually Jacob comes to Egypt with all his sons and their families. Altogether 70 souls entered Egypt in all, and is reunited with his beloved son Joseph, whom he hasn't seen for 22 years. On his way to Egypt, Jacob has a divine promise, is given a divine promise, and God says to him, fear not to go down to Egypt, for I will be there and make you in a great nation. I will go down with you into Egypt, and I will surely bring you up again. That's God's promise to take them out of slavery eventually. Joseph gathers the wealth of Egypt by selling food and seed during the famine. And by doing that, basically improves the economy of the Pharaoh of the Egypt, as well as saves all the people, not only in Egypt, but in surrounding areas as well. Pharaoh gives Jacob's family the most fertile land, the county of Goshen, to settle in, and the children of Israel prosper in the Egyptian exile immensely. And that's the content of this parsha. Now, if you recall it, last week in Miketz, we learned that about Joseph and then his incredible rise from prisoner to power of the viceroy or second in command of Egypt after the Pharaoh. And part of this miracle was his excellent economical plan to save Egyptian population from starvation and all surrounding areas. So I would dare to say that he was probably the first economist in human history. And I'm not alone in this. Rabbi Sachs, God bless his soul, is confirming that as well in many of his articles, and other rabbis. In his last book, Judaism's life-changing ideas, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs brings up another very interesting aspect of Joseph's field of capabilities. And this is in this parsha, Vayigash. And what Rabbi Sachs says, that Joseph acts in this parsha as the first cognitive psychotherapist. I'm going to prove that, to provide a proof for that. what we're looking at is he had 22 years, including years in prison, to analyze what has happened to him and to come up with solution for himself, because one alternative was a horrible depression and he would probably die in jail. The other alternative is what he has chosen. He was the first to understand the concept of reframing. That is, seeing all the negative events of his life in a new way. And in the process of this, liberating himself from the depression. And then he uses the same sort of methodology, ability on his brothers. Right here in this parsha. The moment at which he does so comes when, moved by Judah's passionate plea to let Benjamin return home to their father Jacob, he finally reveals himself to his brothers. Look what he says. I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourself for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be no plowing or reaping, so no harvesting. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you and to save your lives by great deliverance. So then it was not you who sent me here, but God. So he tells them straight away, hey guys, I have got no problems with you. It was all God's plan. Note, what Joseph is doing here, he is reframing all the events so that the brothers will not have to live with an unbearable burden of guilt for having sold Joseph into slavery and for deceiving their father for 22 years of total grief. But he is only able to do so for them because he has already done that for himself. When it happened, we don't know. We cannot be sure. Did Joseph figure it out all along when he was in jail, that many blows and misfortunes he suffered were all part of the divine plan? Or did he only realize this when he was taken from the prison and stood in front of the Pharaoh and explained his dreams, and then became the viceroy of Egypt? We really don't know when he did that. The text is absolutely silent on this at this point. But more than any other character in Torah, Joseph attributes all his achievements to God. This allows him to do what in secular terms 3 great psychotherapists have done after the Second World War. One of them is Viktor Frankl, the author of logotherapy and who was imprisoned in the concentration camp during the World War II. Aaron T. Beck, one of the founders of what is widely regarded as the most effective form of psychotherapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. And last but not least, Martin Seligman, the founder of positive psychology. All 3 have advised him to do, if he has been one of their patients, they would advise him to do exactly what he has done. I'm nearly sure Viktor Frankl would say, and this is what Rabbi Sachs is saying, Viktor Frankl would say, think of a mission, Joseph, you're being called to fulfill by God. Aaron Beck would say, Joseph, reinterpret your misfortune as an opportunity for growth. And Seligman would advise him to see the positive elements of his current situation. Not only was Joseph freed from his physical prison, he freed himself from his emotional prison, namely resentment towards his brothers, elimination of this victimhood attitude which he could have. He now saw his life not in terms of family drama, of siblings rivalry, but as part of a much larger movement of history as shaped by divine providence, God's plan. All three of those giants of psychotherapy, which I mentioned, are Jewish, not only by birth, but by their way of perceiving the world, perceiving reality. At the heart of Judaism is the idea of human freedom. We are not prisoners of events, but active participants and shapers of those events. To be sure, we may be influenced by unconscious drives and resentment, but we potentially can rise above them by using habits of our heart that help us to refine our personality. Joseph's life shows that we can defeat tragedy by our ability to see our life not just as a sequence of unfair events inflicted on us by other people or by others, whatever, but also as a series of divinely intended moves, each of which brings us closer to a situation in which we can do what God wants us to do. Yes, we have freedom of choice and we can make choices at key points. But this is exactly what this is. To be able to make the right choices and to perceive reality in a positive way. This actually lies in foundations of the Hasidic philosophy. Look at this. The Chabad Hasidut, developed by the first Lubavitcher Rebbe Shneir Zalman of Liadi. The word Chabad stands for the initial letters of the three intellectual virtues, Chokhmah, Bina, and Da'at, which means wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, which influence the more emotional attributes of our psychology, Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferet, which is kindness, self-restraint, and emotional balance. It was in this way an anticipation of cognitive behavioral therapy. We cannot all be Joseph, but thanks to Rebbe Shneir Zalman of Liadi in spiritual terms and to Frankel, Beck, and Seligman in secular terms, we can learn what it is to change the way we feel by changing the way we think. And the best way of doing so is to ask ourselves a question. What does this bad experience enable me to do that I could not have done otherwise, without being in that negative situation? And that can be a life-transforming idea, which Rebbe Sachs gives us in this parsha. We are not prisoners of events, but they are active shapers. Shabbat Shalom.
למען אחי ורעי, למען